Welcome back, everybody, to the Retrograde right here on Dead Jester Cinema. What is the Retrograde? Well, we're going to go through an old movie, and then when it's all said and done, I'm going to break that movie down into 4 categories: plot, characters, direction, and music. And I'm going to assign a letter grade to each of those categories, and then when it's all done, I'm going to combine all those letter grades into one cumulative score for the entire film. And on this edition of the Retrograde, we're going to look at the 1998 sequel to Child's Play, Bride of Chucky. The film opens up on a rainy night at a police evidence lockup, and oh hey, look, there are some cute references to other slasher franchises. Anyway, Officer Shady sneaks in, steals a bag out of an evidence locker, and when he goes to meet the person he's smuggling the goods to, he gets paid by getting his throat slit. Way to keep your head on a swivel there, Chief. The killer is revealed to be Tiffany, played by Jennifer Tilly, and she reveals the contents of the evidence bag to be none other than Chucky's slap-chopped remains from the end of Child's Play 3. And she proceeds to stitch him back together over the opening credits to some kick-ass Rob Zombie. After the credits, we are introduced to a few characters: David, Jade, and Jade's asshole uncle, played by John Ritter. David is supposedly picking up Jade for a prom date, but when the couple leave, it's revealed to be an elaborate ruse so Jade could sneak off and mac out with her real boyfriend Jesse. But their fun is quickly interrupted as they are being pulled over by the cops. And literally, this whole scene is interrupted as we gotta jump back to the Chucky and Tiffany story. So anyway, Tiffany is attempting to resurrect Chucky, but her voodoo for dummies doesn't seem to have done the trick and she gives up, as Chris Angel Mind Freak shows up looking to get a different kind of freak on. So Tiffany obliges and cuffs Mr. Goth to the bed so he and the Chuck can watch Tiffany striptease as she drops some backstory on her and Chucky's relationship status before he was killed. And Tiffany's dime store voodoo from a few minutes earlier seems to have worked as Chucky comes back to life and kills the Chris Angel doppelganger by smothering him with a pillow and his ass. I gotta admit, it is a really fun reintroduction into Chucky after like the 6 or 7 years it's been between part 3 and this one. And I do really like the stitched up look of him in this film too. Oh hey, remember these guys? Anyways, them being pulled over was all orchestrated by Jade's uncle, as he's quite disapproving over her choice of boyfriend, so he takes her home.
You fuck! But you won't. Not Jade anyway, not anymore.
He is such a delicious asshole in this movie. Rest in peace, John Ritter. Back with Chucky and Tiffany, we find out that the reason Tiff resurrected Chucky was because she thought he was going to propose marriage to her. But Chucky never had any intention on marrying Tiffany and laughs in her face about it. So Tiffany takes that news about as well as you might expect any woman would, and she locks that asshole up in a baby playpen. So the next day, after Tiffany enlists her neighbor, who happens to be Jade's boyfriend Jesse, to unwittingly help her make Chris Angel disappear, and after Tiffany teases Chucky with a doll more his stature, Chucky handles the situation the best way he knows how, and that's by escaping and killing Tiffany. And to add insult to injury, he traps her soul into a doll body as well, and if she wants to get back into a human body, she's going to have to help him find the Amulet of Damballa? Wait a second. He didn't need that amulet in the first 3 movies as far as I remember, so what the fuck? And plus, I thought the original took place in Chicago, so why is Charles Lee Ray's body buried all the way back in New Jersey? Like, is that where he's originally from? It's never mentioned in this movie, so a little bit of clarification on that would have been nice. Anyway, Tiffany gives herself a Sandy from Grease makeover and once again enlists the help of Jesse by paying him to deliver her and Chucky to the cemetery in New Jersey where Charles Lee Ray is buried. So Jesse, now rocking a nice wad of cash, goes to collect his girlfriend Jade, and the two decide to run off together, but not before Uncle Jack Tripper decides to plant some Mary Jane in Jesse's van so his stooge can arrest them for possession later. Seriously, Warren here has got some major league issues. I mean, he could be more f***ed up than Chucky. But before Chief Asshole succeeds in his plan, both Chucky and Tiffany murder him Pinhead style and hide his body under the seat before Jade and Jesse return. The two wind up getting pulled over by Tripper's lackey anyway, and upon inspecting the vehicle, he finds the planted weed. Chucky, knowing their ride is in jeopardy, takes matters into his own hands and kills the cop by blowing up his car with him in it. And during their escape from the chaos, Jade and Jesse are suspicious and they both accuse one another of killing the officer, just as their friend David calls to tell them both that they are wanted fugitives. Being a little nitpicky here, but holy crap, news traveled fast, even by 1998 standards. And I also didn't know cell phones at the time had a speaker button option. I mean, if they did, it couldn't have been that good. Unless, of course, Jesse is just that deaf and he needs to have that phone volume cranked up to 11. Anyways, after just accusing each other of murder and finding out that they are wanted criminals, they decide that this is the perfect time to get hitched because why not, I guess. And while those two dummies are off making questionable life choices, Chucky and Tiffany are rocking out and enjoying each other's company while reminiscing, and holy fuck! Well, after that brief heart attack, Chucky kills Warren, permanently this time. Jade and Jesse are then rudely interrupted by another pair of newlyweds who wandered into the wrong room but offered a swing to make up for the inconvenience. And in the confusion, Tiffany notices the woman steal Jesse's wallet, so later that night as the two are getting it on, and let me just add, I haven't seen such uncomfortable sex since Tommy Wiseau in The Room, Tiffany shows up and in a brilliantly awful display of 90s CGI, she kills them by shattering the mirror above the bed and letting the shards cut them to pieces. Honestly, it's a pretty creative and cool kill, I just wish it wasn't ruined by that awful CGI. This display of violence makes Chucky fall in love with Tiffany, so he officially proposes to her, and we are then treated to a sex scene that might rival the one from Team America as the best and most sensual lovemaking between two dolls ever captured on film. The next morning, after Jesse and Jade both unknowingly call their friend David for advice, they, along with a cleaning lady, discover the remains of the swinger couple, so they go to run again. But they each are reaching their breaking point, and they start freaking out on each other as David shows up. And he gets them both to slow their roll and realize that their freak out is a big misunderstanding. However, David then discovers the body of Jade's uncle Warren and does a hard 180 on their innocence.
David, come on, buddy, it's me. Come on, let's talk this over.
I'm not your buddy, friend. He's not your friend, guy. I'm not your guy, buddy. He's not your buddy, friend.
Shit starts going sideways really fast, so Chucky and Tiffany break cover and turn the guns on the three kids. And justly freaked out by the recent turn of events, David goes to run but steps out the wrong way and... oh, and the CGI just keeps getting better.
So how did you end up like this?
Well, it's a long story. In fact, if it was a movie, it would take 3 or 4 sequels just to do it justice.
Okay, I gotta admit, that is pretty funny. While holding the two captive, Chucky and Tiffany explain their plan, which per usual involves moving their souls into the body of Jade and Jesse. But their time is running out as they overhear on the radio that the police plan to exhume Charles Lee Ray's corpse as his fingerprints have shown up at the scene of the recent crimes. After ditching the van and stealing an RV, Jade and Jesse plant a seed of doubt in Tiffany's mind about Chucky, and the two get into a pretty hilarious bickering fight when Jade kicks Tiffany's ass into the oven and Jesse crashes the RV off-road. In the aftermath, Tiffany, now extra crispy, breaks out and attacks but fails really hard, and as Jade flees to safety, she is kidnapped by Chucky and taken to the cemetery. And as he's forcing her to retrieve the amulet of Damballa from his grave, Jesse arrives with Tiffany and demands that Chucky let Jade go. But during the swap, Chucky throws an awful CGI knife into Jesse's back. I really hate harping on it, but is CGI really necessary, especially in a scene like this? It just sticks out like a sore thumb, and the effects have not aged well at all. Chucky then ties up the couple and starts the soul transferring process, but before he finishes, Tiffany asks Chucky for a kiss. And in that moment of distraction, she pulls Chucky's knife and stabs him right in the back. The two start going ham on each other with shovels before Chucky eventually returns the favor by stabbing Tiffany. And that's when Jesse steps in and Mark McGuire's Chucky into his own grave. And as the police arrive, Jade grabs a gun and shoots Chucky dead. And as the couple walk away, the movie ends with Tiffany springing back to life and giving birth to a literal abomination, which we'll get into next time. And that, kids, was 1998's Bride of Chucky, so let's just hop on over to the Retrograder and let's break this shit down. I'm giving the plot a C+. There's a lot of things I like about this movie, but there are also some things that I don't. I feel very conflicted about the overall tone of the movie. On one hand, I appreciate the shake-up and going for a more dark comedic approach, especially after the third film where I said that the series formula up to that point had seemed to go a little stale. But on the other hand, I feel like they pushed a little too far with the humor that starts to border on parody because it's ramping up the silliness a little too much. And yes, there's always been those elements of dark comedy in the Chucky films, but I feel like here it is focused on way too much. The plot itself, once again, is very much like the first three movies. and is all about Chucky getting his soul out of the doll and into a human body. Except this time there is an extra soul to transfer with Tiffany's, which I guess makes it different and unique, or whatever. And seriously though, I'm not gonna rag on it too much because, I mean, look at franchises like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. They're notorious for doing the same things over and over again, and I really love those films. But who knows, maybe I'm being a little too harsh on it because I don't have that real familiarity or the nostalgia with Chucky and Child's Play beyond the first 3 movies like I do with those other franchises. But on the other hand, I kind of wish that Chucky would just accept his fate as a doll and give up trying to ever become human again. You know, just something different. There is also just major inconsistencies with the rules in regards to the soul swapping in this one. If you remember the voodoo ritual from the original, it says that you can only pass your soul into the first person you revealed yourself to. So in this instance, for Chucky, that would either be Tiffany or the annoying goth dude who got smothered by Chucky's ass. But seeing as how it's the same doll from the end of the 3rd movie, wouldn't they need to track down Tyler? I mean, that's kind of what they had to do in the 2nd one. Chucky had to track down Andy because they just reused the parts from the original doll. But I guess the amulet allows you to bypass all of that? Perhaps? I mean, I don't know. It's never really explained. The characters get a B. Unlike the previous 3 films, Chucky is the star in this one. And I feel like the ramping up of the dark comedy really allowed Brad Dourif to showcase his comedic range, and because of the expanded role this time around, I think he was able to bring a lot more personality to the character, something that I didn't even think was possible just because of how good he has been up to this point. And maybe aside from part 2, this might be the best all-around version of Chucky, especially from a performance standpoint. But I also love the look of him too, and I also think that the doll mechanics for both him and Tiffany are a major improvement over the other films previously in the franchise. Speaking of Tiffany, I've never really been a fan of Jennifer Tilly. I just find her presence and voice to be like nails on a chalkboard. And on first watch of this years ago, I found myself getting really annoyed. However, upon this most recent viewing, I actually started to warm up to her a bit. Other than being a psycho herself, she has a sincerity about her and she genuinely seems to care about Jesse and Jade's well-being. And she has phenomenal chemistry with Brad, and the two do play well off each other. If I did have to ding one thing about them, it is that their relationship does seem a little too TV sitcom-y for my own personal taste. Jade and Jesse themselves are okay. They're pretty standard as far as these movies go, and they don't really exhibit a lot in terms of personality to stand out one way or the other. I really did like their friend David. I just wish he didn't die in such a CG'd shitty way. John Ritter is great, even if it is just a little bit too over the top in terms of his asshole character. The rest of the cast, however, is pretty cringe and forgettable, in my opinion. I think this movie does have really strong mains in terms of Chucky and Tiffany, but beyond them, it just sort of all slides downhill. The direction also gets a B. Ronnie Yu's direction here is a definite improvement over the last film. But I don't know if I would rank it above the original or part 2. Much like the second film, I appreciate all the pops of color and the overall saturated palette, because it really livens up the frame. But at the same time, I think it looks a little too bright and a little too polished and clean, and I think that makes the movie look a little cheap, at least to me, if that makes any sense. But the CGI, good God, the CGI. I don't really got a dedicated place to talk about this, so I'll do it here. The CGI is garbage. It's completely unnecessary, and it's done in scenes and moments that all could be done practically in the camera, and it just makes everything feel cheap. So overall, the direction is solid. I just wish Ronnie Yu didn't get lazy by choosing CGI effects over the use of practical effects. Music gets a B-. There isn't much of a broad musical score to talk about here, at least not like the scores of the last 3 films. Because similarly to a lot of other movies around this time period, they focused on licensed music to integrate into the film more than an actual musical score. which is still there, mind you, but it just doesn't stand out the same way the previous scores did. The more memorable tracks this time around are from artists and bands, which is fine, I got no issue with that, and I think for what it's worth, it perfectly sets the tone right off the bat because, come on, who doesn't love hearing Living Dead Girl by Rob Zombie? But even though I'm grading this high, I still think I prefer the actual musical scores from the first 3 films. And the one that's in this just doesn't achieve the same kind of chills and atmosphere that the originals did. With those 4 grades combined, that brings the cumulative score up to an 82%. And I'm not going to round up and I'm not going to round down. So that means the final grade for 1998's Bride of Chucky is a B-. I had fun with this entry, at least a little bit more than I did when I first watched this like over 20-something years ago. It's a welcome shake-up to the franchise when it needed it the most. My only gripes are that they pushed a little too far with the comedy, the plot doesn't completely align with the established lore, and the dodgy CGI. It might be short on scares, as I really don't even consider this a horror movie, it's more of a dark comedy, but it's a fun ride nonetheless. But yeah, that was Bride of Chucky. What do you guys think of the movie? I know a lot of fans love it, and it's an entry that I remember watching when I was younger a long time ago, and I never really got into it, but kind of viewing it with fresh eyes this time, I appreciate it a little bit more. I may not like it still on the same level like I like the original 3, but I definitely had a little bit more fun with it this time. So, did I grade it fairly? Should I have graded it higher? Should I have graded it lower? Please leave your grades or your opinions on it below. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Adios, and GTFO!